Welcome to The Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. You guys know we spend a lot of time on this show talking about how to find opportunity in every challenge, how to find strength in the face of every battle, how to reject any form of limitation placed on you, and to find a higher level of potential in the face of those challenges. And in doing so, once you find that potential within yourself, you find it in everyone around you. And there's few stories that are more embodying of that very message, that very mindset, than so many of those who have battled childhood cancer. And this month of September being Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and leading up to our final push into the Columbus Nationwide Children's Hospital Marathon, we are honored to bring you guys, from now till the marathon, so many incredible, impossible stories of those who have battled childhood cancer from many different perspectives. And we are extremely honored today to kick off this next series in the podcast by having the one and only Desni Crock on the podcast today. She is a mom of 2 children who have battled cancer. But so much more than that, she used the challenge she faced in those circumstances to build an organization that has been helping and serving those who battle childhood cancer in countless ways throughout our area and so far beyond. She is a true hero when it comes to this fight. She inspires and motivates kids. She builds community amongst them, and she provides countless research dollars to help drive forward life-saving research, development, and growth in the world of battling childhood illness. So we are honored to have Desni Crock on the podcast today. Mm-hmm. You guys are going to love this story. Definitely stick to the end to hear everything. She's got some really unique perspectives just as a mom and as a caregiver about not just the physical battle of childhood cancer, but especially the mental health and emotional health side of everything that you go through. So we're going to dive into all that. But Desni, thank you for being on today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for that incredible introduction. I sound really awesome.
Hey, we just speak the truth how it is. That's what we do. And you are awesome. I mean, we were talking about, you guys remember back episode, I think it was episode 10, I think, with Ginger McConnell. We were talking about her before we started the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I would rank you right up there with her as somebody who's just taken so much challenge, so much pain, and turned it around and built so much positivity from it.
Thank you. That is one of the best compliments you could ever give me in my life.
Yeah, well, you helped me through a lot when I was battling cancer over 10 years ago now, and you're still helping kids to this day. You know, you've learned in real time from helping your own kids battle this disease, and I always see it in you as well, this piece that we've found where being able to support and build up other kids, being able to serve them when they're kind of in that darkest hour facing that diagnosis, and help their pain and their suffering to be just a little bit less, is one of the most, I think, empowering, motivating, fulfilling things you could ever experience.
It's the only way I can see to give back. Mm-hmm. That's what it all boils down to, is that I was given so much love and compassion when I first was going through this, that there's no other way. There's no other way.
Absolutely. And we feel the same way. That's why we do everything we do here. So take us back all the way to the beginning of this journey. How did your journey, your battle against childhood cancer first begin?
So my eldest child was about, I think, a year and a half when she had pneumonia, supposedly. That's what the diagnosis was. We had gone in multiple times for this cough that just would not go away, and a fever that would not go away. We fought it day after day after day. And her doctor got her a chest x-ray to see what was going on, and it looked like either it was a collapsed lung or pneumonia. And the doctor, oh, God love her, she looked at me with such panicked eyes and said, you need to take her to the ER now. I barely had I think I had maybe a diaper or two, and I wasn't planning on being there that long, so I didn't really grab the full diaper bag with bottle or anything. And I had given her some ibuprofen before we went to the doctor. And so we went over to the ER, and I called my husband and I called my mom and I said, hey, we're over at the ER. It's an emergency, blah, blah, blah. And when we got over there, she was fine. The fever had broken because of the ibuprofen. This is the way it had gone for days, is that you give her ibuprofen and she's fine. So she's standing there in the emergency room with her shirt up over her head going, Bobby, Bobby Dot, to everybody who walked. That's how she said belly button.
Yeah.
And so, nobody took us seriously that this kid was sick. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we finally, the ibuprofen wore off hours later, and they suddenly realized that this was actually an emergency situation, that we weren't just some crazy parents in there overreacting. They took us, they said that we could either go to Charleston or we could go to Nationwide. And we opted for Charleston because this is a breathing issue, so we thought the closest one was better.
Yeah.
It was out of network, but we didn't care. We needed help for our kid. So for 7 months and 4 or 5 surgeries, we were fighting pneumonia and then an incurable cyst. That's what they thought. They finally removed that portion of the lung that the cyst was in, and discovered that it was a very rare form of cancer called pleuropulmonary blastoma. I've learned a lot of big words through this journey.
Yeah, you do. You do for sure.
That was the first big word that I learned to spell, which was pleuropulmonary blastoma. And we found out it was extremely rare and that it was genetic. And that was all we knew, was that it was genetic, but we knew nothing more than that. This was in 2008. I was also, I found out 2 weeks before that I was pregnant with my second child, Ace. And so needless to say, this was important for us to figure out. We went through 10 months of treatment. It was an aggressive cancer, so therefore it was an aggressive form of treatment. Mm-hmm. And they were giving adult doses of chemotherapy. We had some close calls, and but we got through that. We got through that by the grace of God, in all honesty. A lot of people go through a child's illness and the couple end up not together at the end of it because it is extremely mentally straining. But fortunately, I'm an empath. So while I was feeling very, very martyred, I was the one who always went to the hospital. I was the one who always was home. I was the one who gave up my career. I was the one who was with her every step of the way. In fact, I only missed 2 rounds of chemo, and that was because I was giving birth to the other one. So it was really easy for me to say, oh, my husband doesn't do squat. And then I was home. We were actually at home at one time, and my husband wasn't in bed, and I got up and walked out to the living room, and I saw him scrolling through pictures of our daughter sobbing. And it occurred to me then that, yes, I'm the one going through all of this with her, but he has to watch his child and his wife go away while he continues to work, continues to try to pay twice the bills on half the income. And he's struggling to keep the home going and to, try to be there as much as he can in Charleston. So he would leave a full day's work, drive to Charleston, spend an hour or 2 with us, drive back home, take care of the pets, go to bed, get up, go back to work all day, and do it all over again. And so he it occurred to me, okay, he has his own struggles that he's going on. And I think that saved our marriage, because it suddenly became very clear that I was not alone in this. And that was a huge realization, because I didn't know anybody that had a kid with cancer. I mean, I had no idea. There was nobody. So it was me. And so, everybody was saying, I had great community support. I did. But when the treatment was over, that is when my mental health started to fall very badly. You go from treating and fighting the battle, and you're getting all these scans and all these doctor's appointments, and you're surrounded by medical professionals that are telling you it's working, or we got to change something else, and you're going from fight mode, and then they say, you're done, see you in 3 months. And meanwhile, you don't know what's happening to your kid in her little tiny body. She was when we finished treatment, she was in weight-wise the 5th percentile in weight, but fortunately was still in the 35th percentile for height. She was still growing, but any weight that she would put on would go up. So, she looked ill. Oh, I'm losing the puppy. And so I would look at this little bald head, this little tiny kid, and just wonder what's growing inside of her. And that is when the PTSD started. And that is when the depression and the anxiety started. And I knew that it was a problem. And I was a psych major. So I know, about stigmatism and how it's really shouldn't be and all that stuff. But when it's happening to you, you're looking for permission and validation for these feelings, and for someone to say it's okay to get help. And I knew that, but yet I didn't know that. And I was in so many doctor's offices, my own doctor's offices too, because I had my thyroid removed thanks to the gene mutation that we all share. So I was in doctor's offices repeatedly crying, and not a single one of them said, hey, I think you need help. You need to talk to your doctor and get some help. Nobody said that. Not one. And I was in a special moms group that a friend of mine invited me to. These are all people who have got medically challenged kids in our area, and we would go to dinner once a month. And they're all sitting there very casually, calmly talking about what medications they're on and antidepressants and stuff. And I'm like, how did you get your doctor to prescribe that? Because how did you make them realize you need help? And they said, honey, you have to just tell them. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I tell you, my happy pills is what I call them, because without them, I'm a basket case. But that has helped me immensely. And seeing how my children are now older, teens, and going, they were going through puberty and so forth, there's an increased amount of suicide rates in childhood cancer survivors because of the late-term effects and the constant worry about everything. And so my goal was to make sure that their mental health was taken care of first before it became a problem. So when Bridget was preteen, I just took her to the therapist. She wasn't having any problems or anything, just so that she knows she can do that. And we went a couple times and everything was fine. And so then, she went through being a teen pretty well. But she came to me a year ago and said, I'm tired of being a mascot, because I have used her to promote BrAva, to promote childhood cancer. And she is feeling like a mascot. And so she has decided that she does not want to do that anymore. And so we're getting her in therapy, and I've stopped. Well, I'm using her now, but she knows it's still part of the bargain.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was her deal. I had my second child while Bridget was going through a round of chemo, and we had enough knowledge about this type of cancer to know to get a baseline chest X-ray on ACE, and we were fine. We got the scans as they recommended to make sure that she remained cancer-free. We got past the age of 4, which was where they said, okay, it's much lower risk of her getting that type of cancer. But in 2009, they learned about DICER1 gene mutation. And that's the mutation that they have. And there is an entire spectrum of types of childhood cancer that is on that spectrum. In 2010, we were part of a National Cancer Institute study on DICER1, and we were the 3rd family in the study. So we are paving the way of sorts for kids. So when both of my kids were diagnosed, or when Ace was diagnosed with her eye issue, I've had 3 different residents ask me if they can write papers on her, on him. And so I said, sure, absolutely. Suddenly, now on the protocol for DICER1, they're saying you need to start having your kids get eye exams. Yeah. When both of my kids were diagnosed with thyroid nodules, all of a sudden the protocol is everybody needs to start getting thyroid scans, ultrasounds on a regular basis. So we're paving the way, and that's great. Research is fantastic. That's what we want to do. That's how we can contribute. But it's exhausting. It would be nice to have some answers before they happen. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that. And there's a lot of good stuff to unpack there. We'll go back to some of the beginning of what you talked about. Mm-hmm. First, I want to ask, with Bridget being in the ER, and then you go through these battles where they think it's one thing that it's really not. We always like to ask people and just touch on, what was that moment like where the doctor's looking you in the eye telling you your daughter has cancer? How do you take in that news, and how do you move forward with it? That's an excellent question. When we were told that she had cancer, I was at home, and my husband had come home for lunch because he had a gig, and so he came home for lunch for a bit, and I called the doctor and got because I had a message to call him, so I called him, and he said that he wanted me to meet with an oncologist, and that they think it is a cancer. And I said, okay. And, I'm just trying to take it all in and all the information of when and where and when to go. And I hung up, and my brother was there. He's the one who had given me the information because my phone had been cut off. My home phone had been cut off because, remember, 7 months worth of doctor's bills and hospital stays and half of our income on one person's and double the bills. And so my brother got a call at our office, and he came up to let me know to call the doctor, and he gave me his cell phone so that I could make that call. And so my brother left, having heard the conversation, and went home and told my mom. I told Bob, and we were just in cleanup mode, pack mode, because it was the next day that we were going to the doctor. And my mom came in, and I was sitting on the floor picking up toys, sobbing, just absolute sobbing, because my beautiful little 2-year-old blonde-haired kid has cancer. That's lung cancer. None of us smoked. That's not fair. That's not fair. And so it was gut-wrenchingly painful, is I guess the only thing I could say. And we went to the doctor, and we were in fight mode. By the time the next day rolled around, we were in fight mode. What are we doing? What are the chances? What's the protocol? And oh, by the way, I'm pregnant. We got to make sure this is okay. Yeah. And our poor doctor, Dr. Chauvenet, he said, "You're pregnant? Okay, but you can't have the baby while you're while you're in treatment." I'm like, "Okay, I won't." But yeah, so it was devastating. So when we go to round 2 with Ace was 7 when he was diagnosed, and he had what I thought was a lazy eye. An eye was drifting, and so he had a well child visit coming up pretty soon. So we just decided to wait, and we went to the well child visit, and there was complete mass in there, darkness. They couldn't see anything. So they said, "We need to get you into the hospital tomorrow." So we went up there, and he's getting an eye exam, and it does the good eye, and all is well. And then they switch over to the other eye and ask, "Can you read the letters on there?" And he said, "I can't even see the screen." He was completely blind in that eye and never bothered to tell me. So
isn't it unbelievable, like the just inherent natural resilience that kids have, to where like that can be a thing and they just don't even like think it's worth mentioning sometimes. Wow. It's unbelievable.
Well, I'd been telling him, it's probably just a lazy eye. Your dad had that. It's okay. We'll get a patch, whatever. Yeah. So we went. They came in and said that there was a mass in the eye, and they believe it is a certain type of tumor, medulla epithelioma, and that it was not going to be treated by chemo or radiation, that the only way to treat it is to remove it. And in my mind, I could only think, woohoo! Sorry, I probably blew your ear.
You're all good.
I was like, yes, no chemo? We don't have to have chemo. No chemo. Take the eye, but no chemo. But it wasn't registering to me that no chemo means that if the surgery doesn't work, we're out of luck. And so my reaction was extremely not appropriate. And the doctor kept trying to, just like he was really, okay, you understand we're going to be taking your child's eye. Yeah, go right ahead. Okay, when can we get this done? And there was no tears or anything because we'd been through this, and all I heard was no chemo.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you tell that story and bring that perspective, because it highlights such an important piece of this entire experience of childhood cancer. You get so sick and you go through so much struggle and suffering from whether it's chemo or radiation or whatever it is for that individual. You become so numb and your entire perspective on what's a challenge shifts. Mm-hmm. And in many ways that can actually be very good, very positive. But in other ways, like you just bring up, sometimes it can, I don't want to even say it was wrong, but it can just shift your perspective to a point that it's hard to go back and recognize the significance of what's happening.
Right.
Because I think most people would expect you to say that, like, that was your deepest fear, like your biggest trauma come to life. You went through one child that had cancer, and now the second would be infinitely even more crushing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure in some ways it was, but I 100% understand how that could be your mentality. Mm-hmm. Hearing the words no chemo and thinking, oh, it's just an eye, he's got a spare, we'll be fine, we'll move on, we'll get it done. And I think that's got to be so staggering for people who have never battled through something like this to even hear or to even comprehend. But I 100% understand like how you can get there. You know, in my journey, I had gone through sepsis 2 times before I had my really bad one when I was on ECMO, to the point that like when I'm getting ready to go on ECMO and I'm in the ER and they're converting it into a surgical suite, I'm just like, oh, this is, you know, to me it was normal at that point. Same with like even still today, I'm this way, in that my heart randomly went into AFib last week for no reason whatsoever. And I was like, well, my heart's out of rhythm, but let me go run another mile. I'll finish this training run. I'll go home, take a shower, and then I'll go to the ER. You know, it's like, I just never considered it to be this big thing.
Right.
And come to find out, it is a pretty serious thing, and I probably shouldn't have done that. But, you know, it's just, it so dramatically shifts your perspective on what can be a challenge and what's not a challenge, and the relativity of everything. Yeah. And I think we can bring a lot of good from that. I really, truly do. But I think that is such a powerful story because it highlights such a significant piece that a lot of people don't think about in this battle. And something else you talked about earlier that I really, really like that you brought up and said it, because it was my personal experience, and it was something Austin experienced. Austin wasn't a child when he battled cancer, but he's still a very young adult. And I think children in the adolescent young adult group share a lot of the similar struggles. And I think in some ways there's things that kids battle that the AYA doesn't battle. And there's a lot of things AYA battles that kids don't necessarily battle as much, just because you're in different periods of your life. But one thing we really experience is that the hardest part oftentimes begins when you're done. And you explained it perfectly. It was exactly my experience back in my day, even, and especially in your day. There was no transitions of care. And especially in your days of battling through this, mental health was not a discussion.
Right.
Like, people laughed at you if you brought up those words. You know, fortunately, we're getting, I think, better and better about it as a society. But especially back then, it wasn't even something that was considered. And for me, it was, you know, I was actually, for the most part, really strong, really positive, in like a really good spot while I was battling through all of this. And then the second it ends, just like you said, you go from fighting for your life every single day. And when you have that kind of mentality, it gives you such a deep level of purpose and meaning that you can't find that in day-to-day life unless you work to create that. And that's another big thing of what we do with the podcast and with the business. We help people create purpose for their life, because that's the only solution, it's the only antidote from slipping into that darkness that can come when you don't have a purpose equally significant.
Not only that, but it's empowerment. It's you're in battle mode, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to sit back and do nothing. And you gotta have some sort of control over your life. And this is the way, BrAva was the way that we empower ourselves to continue the fight. And it not only that, but we encourage the parents to join us once they're done with their journey, and several of them have, where they can join our committee and feel empowered and emboldened and able to contribute. And it's very helpful.
That's amazing. And that's exactly the solution, is you offer them a path forward, you offer them a purpose. It may not ultimately end up being their life's defining purpose, but it's a step, it's a direction, it's something they can move in, because that's the hardest part that we both experienced. And I was really focused on when Austin came out of his first round of treatment. And we had many discussions talking about how, hey, when this finishes, like, that's going to be the hardest part.
And it absolutely was. And that's why I'm so thankful and impressed to hear and see what you do. Because that, again, coming out of the treatment was, you know, oh, you're in remission. And I was like, great. And I had a nice little vacation after my first remission call. And came, and honestly, I was still somewhat distracted during the vacation because I was just like, I don't have another appointment. Like, it's 3 months from now. And I'm like, all right, sweet. That's great, I think. And then I came back, started working again. And that was quite a long and harsh fall that I found myself in. Bit of weightlessness. And it was impossible performance in working with Matt and really engaging with the community that we've built here with Team Impossible is what, it is what saved me. There was not a whole lot of work that I had done on the personal level to the degree of what I've been able to accomplish now personally. But at that point, it was definitely, I needed a lot of kind of arms and shoulders to rest up on. And yeah. And here I am now and with that purpose that you need to look for, like Matt described. And ultimately it's been very, very beneficial.
Good.
So
I'm glad to hear that. One of the things I did notice, Bridget was a toddler when she was diagnosed. Ace was in elementary school. The mental challenges between the two of them is immense. Bridget just thought that this is what all kids go through. This is nothing different from everyone else. Every other kid she saw was in the hospital too. So, this wasn't a big deal. Didn't know any difference. So when it was done with her, there was nothing. It was no big deal. Ace, when it was done with him, he was missing an eye. That was very obvious. That is a big plaster on your face that you never can get rid of. And so the mental health challenges that he has gone through versus what Bridget has gone through is immense. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of PTSD. And it made me aware very much that the older kids, the young adults, definitely, I think, have it far worse than the younger kids. Now, the parents have to entertain a child, a toddler, in the hospital and try to keep them from pulling their tubes out and all that stuff. It's a different challenge. But the older the kids, I definitely think that there's a strong mental health component that needs to be addressed with those kids that are in school currently, surrounded by their peers. We never really had any issues with him getting bullied or anything like that because the kids all knew. I had gone into the school prior to the surgery to take his eye and explained to his classmates what's going to happen, that it's going to be okay, that he's going to be missing an eye and he's going to be wearing a patch for a while, and maybe eventually he'll be able to show you the eye. And one of my memories on Facebook popped up saying that I was carrying an eye in my purse today because he finally got courageous enough that he was showing the kids in his classroom his eye, and it popped out in class.
Oh no.
Like his prosthetic eye.
That is a phone call you never want to get is, your kid lost their eye. I've got it in a Ziploc baggie. So I carried my purse around I carried my kid's eye around in my purse until we got to the hospital a few days ago, or a few days later, but
things you'd never think you'd go through.
So, I often thought, when you were going through this, Matt, you were a junior?
Yeah, senior in high school.
High school. And you really touched my heart because I knew your battle was hard, and then you had all those teenage drama things too. You had your prom that you were missing. You had sports that you were missing, and I remembered what Bridget went through, and I thought that's got to be awful. That's got to be awful.
Yeah. Well, it's why I say that I don't think one's better or worse. No. Even it's hard to use those words. I think the challenges are just a lot different. Like you say, Bridget grew up, and that's kind of the only world she knew for a long time, and so, you know, in some ways that can be a helpful thing, but in other ways, like you say, it can make it infinitely more difficult on the parents sometimes. But yeah, it was being in that age, especially as like the senior in high school. I literally received my college acceptance letter 2 weeks before my diagnosis. Wow. And it was like, you know, at the time it was like my dream college, my dream situation moving forward and everything I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden that gets ripped from you. And when you're in high school, like that's your whole world. Like there's you don't see 5 years down at least most kids don't. Yeah. You don't see 5 years down the future. You don't see 10 years down the future. You know, you're not looking at all of this life ahead of you. You just see like what this year holds and what, you know, what's coming up, what's coming next. And actually at first it was, I was really blessed to have just an amazing support community. I mean, from every single person, the people we lived around, the people I went to school with, like everybody in this. I mean, you know what an unbelievable community this is. And that's why I've always said I got the opportunity to witness the very best of humanity. And what I realized very early on was that like I could show up and I could put a smile on my face and that would give positive motivation to people. And that was a very powerful, rewarding thing for me. And so that was something that like really drove me from those first 3 months before amputation. And what was really interesting is after amputation, it just so happened to coincide that I was diagnosed in February, began treatment a week later, and then was on chemo for a little over 3 months. Graduated high school on May 24th. My amputation was on June 10th. So it was like right as school was ending and letting out, I had my amputation, which I always tell people, again, kind of like your story with Ace being diagnosed, the amputation was the best part of 2013 for me. It was my favorite thing that happened to me in 2013 was getting my leg cut off because I got to be off chemo for 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's, and I still mean that to this day. Like I mean that so deeply in my heart because that's how bad chemo is. Like getting my leg cut off was nothing compared to that. Like absolutely not. I was like with the eye, I was like, take it, like no big deal. I'll be off chemo for 3 weeks. That's all I care about, you know? And, but what was interesting is after that, things got infinitely harder after that from mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional perspectives, because the way it lined up and the timing and everything during the amputation recovery period, I was actually in pretty good spirits because I was recovering from the chemo and my body was feeling more energy, better than it had like ever had, you know, in the past several months. But I had graduated. All my friends were off doing their summer things. I wasn't incredibly mobile yet, so I couldn't go out and do a lot. And then into the fall, all my friends went off to college or to get jobs or to start families or whatever it is they're doing. And all of a sudden, I mean, I still can't complain. I had an amazing community, amazing family, amazing friends that really made the extra effort to be up there and to see me and to stay in touch with me. But all of a sudden, I felt much more alone than I had previously. Not only that, I was recovering from a major surgery, and before I'd even remotely recovered from it, I was back on chemo again. Yeah. And it was night and day, the pre-surgery chemo to the post-surgery chemo. Even though it was the same regimen, my body was in a much different place. And so that's where it got really, really hard on me. But even then, battling through that side of it, there was nowhere near as intense as what it was to come out of that. And at first I was really good coming out of like the ECMO and everything, because it was like my recovery, my journey back to health and physical and mental health was like, that was kind of my mission and my goal. And I largely have my dad to thank for that, because he set me on that path. You know, they didn't think I'd be physically or mentally capable of living independently for the rest of my life after coming off ECMO. And he started me from day one on that journey. And that really kind of became my purpose. It was when I went off to college that next year, like September of 2014, that things got really, really tough, because now I'm around this entirely group of people. My whole world has just been altered, and everything that I've experienced, nobody around me can even remotely comprehend, right, for the most part, you know. And so So there was a lot of darkness I slipped into from that level of isolation, you know.
And Bridget is of the mindset of looking forward to going off to college where nobody knows her story. And she can just be known for her and not the cancer kid. Because she's kind of a local celebrity.
Yeah, I get that.
There's a lot of adults that, you know, go up to her and like, oh, Bridget, oh, you know, because they're they've been following her since she was 2, and she doesn't know who they are.
Yeah,
and she just wants to be known for something other than just having cancer.
And I understand that perspective too so much. There were times that I've felt that later on in school and things like that. I don't know that I ever felt it probably as intensely as she does now, but I understand why she would feel that way, you know, because now it seems like maybe she's to the point that, you know, for a while that was her only world, that was all she knew. And then especially as she grew up like with BrAva,
right,
because she was a main driving force behind that, you know, again, that's kind of all she would have known. But then coming into teenage years, developing into an adult and learning her own passions and interests and purpose in life, you know, I can see how she wouldn't want that as a representation of everything she is. And I think that's perfectly understandable.
And I know that eventually she'll come back around to, this is my mission, this is my purpose. But right now I'm letting her, you know, if you don't want to go to relay next year, I said, that's fine. You don't have to go. Ace is still of the mindset of, I want to go. So I still got him.
Yeah. And I think that's awesome. It's really incredible of you from a parenting perspective to recognize that, like, hey, this doesn't have to be my kid's purpose right now. Like, I'm going to let her go off and, you know, explore her own things, and maybe she'll come back to this someday. Maybe she'll find something else in life, and whatever it is, you know, that's going to be great.
Well, here's the thing. She has a 50% chance with every child she has of having a kid with cancer.
Wow.
With the same gene mutation. So unless she adopts, and I told her, I will love any baby you decide to give me. Give me grandbabies, I'm fine with that. But sadly, the battle for her will not be done no matter how much she wants it to be done. You know, if she moves forward and decides to have children, this is going to be a lifelong struggle, because I mean, I know what it's like to be a kid. I mean, to be a parent watching your child go through this, and that is not something I ever would wish on my children, ever.
And I'm really glad you bring up that piece too, the fact that it's a lifelong battle. And I think it's something we've kind of passively discussed on this platform. We've never really given it a lot of active, dedicated time. But it's 100% true. It's something I'm still battling every single day. I mean, it took us 3 years of just heartbreak after heartbreak and almost $80,000 to have our daughter. And now that she's here, it's 100% everything worth it and more. But that was, I will say that was one of the hardest battles I faced from all of this. Was dealing with the infertility and going through that process. And, you know, with Bridget being in a similar, for her, it's almost even more difficult because it sounds like it's almost like a moral dilemma of like, do I try to have kids naturally, you know, or do I not? Or like, what do I want here? What's the answer here? And that has to be an incredibly taxing thing to think about, you know. It may not be something that's weighing heavily on her mind just yet.
It is.
But is it really?
We've already scheduled an appointment at our next long-term clinic to bring in a fertility specialist, just so that she knows her options.
Well, that's incredibly important. I think that's hugely important. And fortunately, it was something that was discussed with me before treatment. I'm infinitely thankful for that, because we were able to take steps to make sure that I had options. You know, not everybody's given that opportunity. And I know, like, that's something that's like weighed pretty heavily on you, Austin, in coming to the next steps of what you have to go through. Yeah,
looking at the treatment that I will be going through after it's most likely confirmed of being a relapse, will be the an autologous stem cell transplant. And so 6 days of high dose chemo, rendering a lot of stuff useless for temporary, but one of the most likely permanent side effects that I can go through is permanent infertility. And so that was one of the driving factors for when I first relapsed this time last year. We wanted to see what my options were going to be for second line treatment. The autologous stem cell transplant was the kind of the standard second line treatment, but we driving force of that, and also the potentials for cancer mutations and just cancer reoccurring down the road as well is also kind of there. And so we wanted to try and find something a little less impactful in the body. I still went through, we had found a clinical trial for CAR T cell therapy down CD30 in particular, down in Houston. Tried that. It was only 3 days of chemo. It was immunosuppressant, and that was the step to try to hold off the infertility, and it unfortunately did not work. So infertility has definitely been a buzz topic for a couple of years now for me, which again is just another one of those mental side effects of going through these kind of battles, stuff that you just don't think about at first, but it's just unfortunately something that you do have to face. And I'm certainly a late bloomer, compared to some of my friends in terms of engaging in the more settled down kind of version of life. And so some negative thoughts have certainly come into my mind. They come and they go in terms of like, oh, well, why didn't you settle down sooner? Where's your wife? Where's the children? Where's the white picket fence? And it's certainly come to the degree now that it does not bother me. It still appears, and especially now with having the realization and facing the reality of going through the stem cell transplant now, but post transplants, I have only a positive outlook, and with obviously technology in the coming times, and discussions with Matt, we have a very positive outlook about what could happen in the future, and it's not a guarantee of permanent infertility. Right. I'm 29. Hopefully down the road it can mean either we can try to recover something or something else pops up, but that's certainly one of the bigger side effects that I've had to kind of face directly with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, not only that, there's certainly that's one of the physical pieces, but there's also like the long-term physical health, and that's something I think that used to be undervalued its significance, only because kids were not tending to live that long after cancer. And now, again, it's good and bad, but now we have kids being cured like myself and living so much longer, yet now I'm 30 years old and dealing with heart problems and all of these other things that, I'm going to face the rest of my life. I've had this weird unknown illness for 4 years now that nobody can figure out. I've seen 10 different specialists and they all say, well, it's probably related to the chemo. Nobody can make heads or tails of it, and so we're still trying to figure that out. And it's always interesting to me, people, and this is one of the most, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. One of the things that I really have to work at that triggers me really hard, that I've got to keep my tongue bit on is, and it happens all the time to me, is people will tell me like, oh, you're 30 years old. You don't know what it's like to deal with health problems, or, you don't know what it's like to feel pain, or, and you shouldn't be having any of this stuff. Like I'd give anything to go back to your age. It's right. I get what they're saying, and I can logically say I can hold my tongue on it. But man, to hear that is one of the most, because it's, and in a way I've tried to turn around and take it as a compliment, because I think people on the outside see me as such a functional person nowadays. that they think like, oh, he's in just like supreme pristine health.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're not seeing the 20 plus different supplements, vitamins, medications I take every day just to keep my body going.
Right.
They're not seeing the mornings I wake up in just immense, immeasurable pain, and it takes me 2 or 3 hours to become a functional human again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not seeing the the doctor's appointments that I go to every single week to try to keep up with this. They're not seeing the AFib that just happens out of nowhere, but you got to just go right back to functioning normally.
Right.
You know, and I've tried to do a better and better job of showcasing this stuff, just to say like, hey, this is still a journey.
Yeah.
I'm not done with childhood cancer. Like, I'm going to battle this the entire rest of my life. And anybody who's ever diagnosed with childhood cancer will battle it the entire rest of their life. And so I was hoping you could actually speak a little bit more to, and I know this is a topic you're very passionate about, but the mental health piece of how this will follow you. It'll be something you fight for the rest of your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Both from like the child's perspective and also from you as a parent's perspective.
So right now I'm dealing with some anxiety over the fact that Bridget's 18. I no longer have access to her medical records. I no longer have control over her medical course of action. I suddenly went from doing everything to make sure this child stays alive to now she's responsible for it herself. And the first time that I realized that, I was actually at the State House in D.C. waiting to talk to a senator there about funding the STAR Act for childhood cancer research. And we were waiting outside in the hall, and this woman that I met from Cleveland and her daughter, who was an adult now, who went through pediatric cancer, they were talking about how difficult it was because, you know, she's an adult and that transition was really challenging. And that's when it hit me that in just a few short years, I wasn't going to be in control. I'm standing in the hallway outside of a congressman's or senator's office, and I start having a severe panic attack, like the kind where you fall to the floor and curl up in a ball and you're crying and trying to breathe, and everybody's coming over and, oh, what's the matter? It's like, just a panic attack. It's just a panic attack. And I go into this office, and I had calmed down enough, but you know, I have the puffy eyes, and I'm
yeah.
And because this is it completely 100% a control thing. When you're going through treatment, even as a caregiver, you don't have control over things, and you struggle to find ways to have control over things. One of the things that I always had to do was I always had to clean my house. I called it scanxiety cleaning because, you know, before a scan, I got to make sure everything's put away and everything's clean because and it's ready to go, because what happens if we end up having to stay in the hospital for 3 weeks and somebody has to come into my house and try to find something so they can bring it to the hospital, because that's happened before. And now, I mean, I have heard somebody describe for a cancer survivor, and for that matter for the caregiver, it's not about worrying about what's going to happen. It's about remembering what has happened. And so you have to have this sense of control wherever you can get it. And even if it means the dishwasher's cleaned out, the clothes are put away, any sense of control. And all of a sudden, my kid not only is going to college next year, but oh, by the way, you don't get to control their doctor's appointments and make sure that they schedule them and make sure that they go, and what is the doctor telling them, and okay, they want you to have this scan, but oh my gosh, you know, are you going to have this scan? It's an all new level of anxiety that that I'm learning about. And it's not fun. It's not fun.
Wow, that's another point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's something I've never even considered before. You know,
your poor mom and dad.
Yeah, that's something I've never considered before, truthfully, because wow, as a parent going through this, not only, and this is something I've loved to like explain to people, is not only do you become used to fighting childhood cancer, you become really good at it. Like, and that's something Natalie talked about. Like, you can look at any lab panel, know exactly what it means. You can talk with any doctor about any of the fancy lingo. You can say all the big words, all the diagnoses, you know, all about the surgeries and the chemo and everything that it's going to cause, and you know how to treat it and how to deal with it. And like you say, you find as much control in all the areas that you can, and you become very, very good at that. So when that's taken away from you, like it's kind of corollary to what we talked about, you know, having this purpose and having this ability and having this skill, you could almost call it, and then not being able to use that or exercise that in any way. I would imagine that has to be unbelievably difficult thing. What's been your like strategy so far for working around that, overcoming that?
I am training my child to be an adult with cancer.
Okay.
Sorry, an adult cancer survivor. That is my goal.
Okay.
I'm lucky in that she turned 18 before she started her senior year in high school. So I have a whole year where I get to teach her how to take care of herself. And that's stressful because the kid doesn't take care of herself, you know. She's doing better about remembering to take her pills and so forth. So that's good. She's doing better. But just to know you can't go 100 miles an hour because you're going to crash. And just being able to say, yes, I want to do 10 different things this week, but realistically, I should probably only do 6 because 10's going to overwork me. And then I'm going to be out for a week because my body crashes. So she needs to learn how to regulate her own mental health, not only mental health, but physical health. She needs to be able to regulate her time better. She needs to be able to learn to say, okay, I can't do that right now because I'm too busy. So she's got to regulate her time. And my goal is this year to train her to be an adult.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to like empower her to be able to do it, to have that control and to take that control for herself. Have you had any kind of conversation with her about like how difficult this is for you?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I pride myself on always being open with my children. They always knew they had cancer. They always knew there was a risk of not surviving their ordeals. They've always known that no matter what, I'm going to have their back and we're going to fight. And so I have always been honest with her about my mental health too, because I want them to know that it's okay to need help. It's okay to ask for help. Bridget, God love her, has a problem asking for help. And so when she does, I try to move mountains to get it done. And unfortunately for her, she's just such a strong kid that oftentimes I don't believe her when she says she needs help. And so that's been a learning curve for me, is realizing, okay, you got to take her seriously, because the kid just was such a powerful 2-year-old. I mean, you couldn't hold her down. And so now she's coming into adulthood and she's not feeling powerful anymore. Yeah. And it is my job to make sure that she learns how to get that power back.
Yeah, and I think what happens in that situation, this is something I've dealt with, I know Austin's dealt with, I think pretty much anybody who experiences this deals with, you're put in this crucible of a situation, and all of a sudden your strength of spirit massively outpaces your strength of body. Not only that, your strength of body is reduced to a point.
Yeah.
That can be different for everybody. And so you can derive a lot of power, a lot of strength, and a lot of impact from that strength of spirit that will spill over into every other category and will influence every other category. But it can become really difficult sometimes to have that high level in strength of spirit, and to reconcile that with wherever your strength of body is. That's something we're always juggling, just trying to figure out. And ultimately, a lot of our goal is to show that, you can build this strength of spirit up within yourself. That will influence your strength of body. That can help improve your strength of body. I know, if physically speaking, I would be nowhere near what I am today. Even though I still deal with a lot of challenges and struggles and detriments, I would be infinitely worse if I didn't have the strength of spirit that I have. And I think, Bridget would probably be a lot of the same way, but it is easy. And there you have to learn this balance of, how do I focus this strength of spirit? And how do I put it into the things that are most crucially important to me?
Prioritizing.
Yes, that was the biggest skill I had to learn. It took me probably a decade to learn. I was the kid, though, that went to college and got over involved in every single thing and spread myself out infinitely way too thin. Because you go through cancer and it's like, that was really, really hard. You go to college and it's like an exam, finals, like, what's that? Like, worst case I fail, like whatever, I'm not going to die.
Hey, you want to join this committee?
Exactly. President of two different organizations at the same time. Yeah. Like, why not?
Why not?
So, so it is an easy thing to fall into. And I think what you need to do is not reduce the strength of spirit, but I think if you can focus it.
Yeah.
And
that's an excellent point.
Yeah. I think that allows you to be infinitely more effective while still living that peace that's inside of you.
And so I need to, instead of saying, you can't do all this stuff, you can't do all this stuff, you can't do all this stuff, I need to say, focus on the things you really want to do.
Yeah.
Let's focus instead of no, focus on yes.
And it will be a time for trials, but be okay with the errors. And all that does is just allows you to find out really what you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about college and university, is that it's a moment to breathe and just really really get out there and find yourself. And I really I did that through our international travels from university. Coming from a small university, I never expected it, but now that I've looking back at it, it really immensely helped fortify a part of me, and I think that ultimately helped me coming into a diagnosis 4 years, 3 or 4 years post, but still it was certainly paramount what I had experienced there at university. So I really wish the absolute best for her.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's great. It should be a time to figure out, what do you love? Try all these different things. But like you said, it's very important to learn and develop the skill, and something I'm still working on, getting better at, but working on this power to say no.
Yeah.
And this was the mindset shift I needed, because I think when you go through this and you have the strength of spirit, the worst thing anybody ever can do for you is to tell you can't do it, because then you are just going to say, watch out and watch me make. But if you go out and then have that attitude watch me make it happen, then you go do it, but it's not something really aligned with your purpose or what you want to do in life, then you're just kind of wasting time and energy.
Yeah.
So you're not saying no because you can't do it. That's what I always thought of. If I say no, that means I can't do it. And I don't believe there's anything I can't do. So what I needed to shift that to was, I'm not saying no because I can't do it. I'm saying no so that I can do these other things that are most important to me. That was what I needed in the mindset shift that ultimately got me better at that skill and wanting to develop that skill, because it is incredibly important. And I mean, the best people in business, which can transfer over to a lot of areas of life, they will tell you the number one thing you can do, especially in the early years, is say no to everything but what is most important to you.
Yes.
Because you only have so much time, you only have so much energy, you only have so many resources. You have to divert those to what's most important to you. But before you can do any of that, you have to figure out what's most important to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is one of those things that I call one of the blessings of cancer. Believe it or not, there are blessings to cancer. And one of those is, what we talked about earlier, not sweating the small stuff. So what? You fail an exam, you're not going to die. But it's being able to say no. I have absolutely no problems saying no. I just quit an organization that I was with for 20 years, not because I no longer believed in that community involvement, none of that. It's because my priority right now is my kids, because I've got 1 more year with Bridget and I've got 3 more years with Ace. So that is my priority. I have every intention of going back to that organization again after they're gone. But right now I have to say no to them. And I cried when I turned in my resignation, but I said no to them because I have to say yes to being as much with them as I can.
And that's another huge skill. And maybe this is something we can discuss in regards to parents and caregivers. The same idea, but as it applies to your life. I'm sure you've had, you went through times where you became really good at doing everything. Like you were going to the doctor's appointments, you were being the mom, you were being the wife, you were running BrAva, which I definitely want to come back and talk about BrAva towards the end here. But, you're doing all of these things, wearing all of these hats, able to conquer all of these things. And so to be able to step back and recognize at the same time, like, I've got seasons here to what I'm doing, seasons to my life. And right now you're in a season where you can spend time with your kids and you can help them develop into flourishing adults, which is such a massive undertaking. I can only imagine.
You'll find out.
To be able to step back and say, hey, I got to say no to some things, not because I can't do them, but because I can, so that I can do these other things that are most important to me. I think that's huge, because I see this all the time where people so easily allow themselves to feel trapped in a situation, whether it's like a job or a relationship or part of an organization, whatever it may be. They allow themselves to so easily feel trapped, and they hate their situation in life, and they're so broken down and beaten down by it, but they don't feel like they have the power to do anything about it.
Right. Because
they just don't think they're allowed to say no.
They're obligated.
Yeah. And that's a really unfortunate place to be trapped in. And I always try to think, like, how is it that how do you get to a point like that? How do you get to a point where you start feeling like your own self-worth and your own value is not important enough, that it has such little importance that you have to sacrifice it for something else that you don't even care about? And, I don't judge anybody for being in that position, because I know that I've been there myself before. I think the ultimate answer is just learning to see and find the value within your own self.
Yeah.
And recognizing that you're not gonna hurt these people by leaving them. You may be an incredible asset, and it may be hard to find a replacement for you, but ultimately you're not serving the people who are most important to you to the best of your ability if you're not taking care of yourself. That's why I've always said that the number one tool to lead, or the number one skill to leadership, is to lead yourself. If you don't have yourself squared away, your health from every domain, you can't be the best possible version of yourself for those around you.
Right.
And that's going to be infinitely more effective than trying to sacrifice everything you are for those around you. So I think that's really great that you were able to come to that realization. I guess I'd ask, like, Because I think about, we've been fortunate now on this side of our journey to become so much more close and in contact with parents of survivors. That was something I didn't have on the former part of this journey. I think now that I'm a parent myself, Austin and I are entering into our 30s and getting old.
Stop it.
But now that we're, we're getting to the point where I see you more as like a peer than like a parent figure. And so we're starting to be able to empathize and relate to those struggles a lot more. But what advice would you give to parents? Because we have a lot of parents that listen to this who are, some of them, their kids are actively going through treatment now. Some of them are years out from treatment, but they're still going to scans, and I think there's a lot of different challenges that come up. So what kind of advice would you offer to parents, not just for dealing with this in the short term, but also in the long term, and exercising some of those practices of how do you let go of some of that control without losing yourself, but at the same time keeping that purpose within your life and being able to trust your child in their own journey?
That's an excellent question. I'm learning it as I go. And I think the most important thing I would be able to say is it's okay. Whatever feeling you have, whether it's being overwhelmed, whether it's being sad, being angry, I think so many times we as, especially moms, perhaps dads too, I've never been a dad, so I don't know, but I think we're often expected to behave a certain way. And so therefore, the ability to say, I can't go to that event because I'm not feeling emotionally stable enough to do that is important. I think being able to say, I can't hang with my friends right now because I'm focused on getting ready for the next scan. And I need to do my routine of in my instance, the cleaning, the laundry, the dishwasher. I've got so many people who have reached out and offered, hey, you can stay with me the night before a scan so you don't have to get up so early and so forth. And I'm like, no, I've got to have that mental routine. And it's okay that I need to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if you need to be on medication. That's okay. It's okay for you to go to your doctor and say, look, I'm not doing well and I need some help. And that's okay. It's okay for you to say to your friend, I'm not doing well and I really need to just stay at home and relax with my kids. It's okay to say to your kids, I'm not doing well. I'm struggling right now. And so just let me have some 10-minute time, 15-minute time, an hour to myself. And then I will be able to be back and be a good mom. It's okay. And some days, okay is all you've got. I've come home from work and had just horrible day. And I'm struggling with my own health and my own mental health. And one of my kids, I'm not going to say who, came in and said, I don't want that for dinner. And it was like a box of mac and cheese or something. And it was just, I looked at them and I said, this is all I've got to give right now.
Yeah.
It's this, or you're going to have to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. This is all I've got to give. And that's okay.
Yeah.
A lot of parents have this guilt thing going. I'm guilty of it too, where if you're not making the perfect lunch or the perfect dinner or and you're doing it all for them, then you're not succeeding. But I think that mindset has to go away, especially when you are dealing with kids' health, and you can only do so much, and it's okay.
Yeah, and it's so important what you said there, how you handle that situation. Like this is all I've got to give right now. I think it's so important to be real and honest, like you say you've been with your kids, to show them that like you go through struggle and you go through challenge too. And sometimes, you know, there's only so much you can offer at any given point. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of that, like, here's what I'm doing to work through this. Here's how I'm overcoming this. Here's how I'm working around this. Here's how I can still show up and give the best of what I've got in any situation. I think that's so much more infinitely important of a skill and a lesson to teach a child than to try to make them believe in this fantasy that you're perfect and you never fail and you never falter and you never have challenge. Yeah. Because when they then start to face challenge and feel imperfect and feel, you know, inferior and feel like they're not doing good enough, then they have a way to reconcile that. They have a way to understand, like, oh, my mom dealt with this. Oh, my dad dealt with this. And here's how they worked around it. And I can do the same in my life. If they've always viewed their parent as like this perfect person who, you know, never fails, never goes through struggle, never, you know, has emotional battles, never has mental battles, then they may think, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Why am I struggling with this? I've never seen my mom or dad struggle with this. Mm-hmm. And so I think, you know, as a parent, you have this urge to try to hide a lot of that stuff from your child. I think that's the worst thing you can do, mm-hmm. because your child's going to eventually experience some of that stuff. The best thing you can do is to empower them with some level of skill to be able to face that and overcome it.
By example.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm one of those who believes if you're in an argument with your spouse, it's okay to have it in front of the child.
Yeah.
Go ahead and have that argument, but make up as well. Mm-hmm. Work it out, talk it out, mm-hmm. and let them know that this is how you do it. You argue, you make up, and you move on.
Yeah. And it's just mind-blowing how they are, even when you don't realize it, they are learning from you mm-hmm. so intensely. Like, we're in a stage right now where we're teaching our daughter how to smile. And it's like, that's one of the most amazing things we've experienced so far, because it's, you know, it's like we'll smile at her and she'll recognize you and smile back.
Yes.
And that feeling you get is, there's nothing else like that. But that's just like the first stage of an infinite number of things we're going to have to teach her. And that's an immense responsibility, but at the same time, what an incredible opportunity it is mm-hmm. to be able to gift what we've learned to her, and hopefully we can do it in the, you know, the best manner possible. But I think if you make your mission to teach your kid how to overcome any of life's challenges, or even if it's not how to overcome them, how to at least face them and how to find a direction to move forward in.
Right.
You know, if you can teach them that, then all of a sudden they're not alone. It's something maybe they don't have experience with, but they knew their mom or dad had experience with it. And so they've got somebody they can go to if they need. They've got a sense of how, you know, somebody they deeply love has dealt with it before. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they've at least got a path forward. Right. May not ultimately be the best path for them, but they've got some way out. They're not trapped in that situation.
Right.
Yeah. So I love that advice you give. And I think that's going to be so important for so many people listening to this, not just parents, but people who may be battling through challenges themselves right now. And one thing that I just definitely want to bring up, and I want to give you a chance to talk about and just discover how the whole journey of everything came to be, is BrAva. BrAva, I know, is an organization that it was you and Tracy that started it together, correct?
I can't even take credit for that.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay.
So it was it was my brother's girlfriend, Amanda.
Okay.
And her friend, who were talking about the fact that, you know, they know Bridget and going through cancer, and Ava was going through cancer, and they said, wouldn't it be great to do a 5K and raise money for research or for kids, and we could call it BrAva. And I thought that was the dumbest name. I said, we're going to have so many people calling it BrAva, and we're going to have to correct them over and over again. But by golly, BrAva stuck, and I said, well, I'll be a part of it. I can't run it because I'm dealing with my kids right now. You know, I can't run it. And so Amanda and Elizabeth, they started it up as president and vice president, and Tracy and I were on the committee, and we were working hard at it, but we were trying to, you know, keep our kids alive. Mm-hmm. So our friends did it, and we stepped in after Amanda and Elizabeth had done it for a few years and were off doing their own things. I took over as president, and then I did it for a few years, and then my kids were getting older and busier, and so Tracy stepped in and took over, and she has run with it and built it into what it is today. And I mean, the group of friends that she's got, the friends that I've got, the family that I've got that have done this, it is all them. When Ace got diagnosed, I stepped back again, and I mean, I barely went to a meeting. They built this. I am a worker bee now, where I go out and they tell me what to do and I do it. And it's just such a phenomenal organization. I have never worked with a group of women more powerful and intelligent and caring and resourceful. And, you know, we sit down and we say, well, this needs to be done. And, you know, somebody says, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. And it gets done. Yeah. And it's fantastic. We originally started this as a 5K. You know, we wanted to help one family. Yeah. And one family a year is what we thought we would be able to do. And if eventually we made enough money, would be able to give to research so that we didn't have any more families that needed help. Our first year, we had 3 kids. Every year since, it seems like there's at least 3 kids. We've never said no. We've said, we got to raise some more money before we can help you, but we're going to help you. But we've never said no. And it has gotten to the point where, I mean, we are all volunteers. And we get so many donations from the community that the majority of the money that gets donated to our organization goes to the kids in one form and another. We either adopt them and just give them a bulk sum of money and say, here you go. We do gas cards, we do gift cards, we do food cards. We used to do back to school time. We would give out money for kids going back to school. We give Christmas every year. We always give Christmas money so that because even though the journey is over for these families, they're still recovering financially from the burdens of this. And so some of them, if they say we're struggling, we don't have money to pay the electric bill. Even though they've received the money previously, we still do what we can to help them out again. It is rare that we ever say no to one of our BrAva kids, yeah. Because if we've got it, we're going to give it. And then this past year, we gave our largest amount to Cure Search, $30,000, because Cure Search is an organization that doesn't just give to one hospital, it gives to multiple. Mm-hmm. So, we're not focusing on one type of cancer, because we've got so many types of cancer in our organization with our BrAva kids that it wouldn't be fair to just give to one hospital when we've got multiple hospitals doing research. So, you've been saying singing my praises about BrAva, and I have done so very little for them, and they have done the world for me, because not just the whole empowerment thing, but it's just been such a joy to get to know these kids, to get to know their parents, to become friends with their parents, to see the kids thriving and survive, not just surviving, they're thriving. And it is absolutely fantastic. And, they don't often remember me, as they grow up. Some of them do, because, I try to, I go through phases where I get to know some kids, and I get very involved in getting to know their family and supporting and being there for their parents and all that. And so I get to know them, and inevitably I get crushed. We lose someone. We lose multiple someones, and it hurts. And so I tend to step back, and I don't get to know some of the kids for a while because it's hard. But I always come back, and I gotta love on those kids because they're just incredible. Yeah. Ashton was hard. Yeah. Ashton was hard. He went to school with Bridget. They weren't friends. They didn't know each other. But the kid should be enjoying his senior year this year. And that's hard. That's hard.
And I'm sure in a lot of ways you saw Bridget's journey in his journey and in him. Mm-hmm. And I think that would make it especially hard.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted us to have some time to focus on this, because even though there may be times where you step in and out of it, or your role may change within the organization, mm-hmm. I've always been able to tell it's something that you have immense passion for.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's just one of the most powerful things, passion and purpose. I mean, those probably the two most repeated words on this show besides the word impossible. Mm-hmm. But those are such immense, powerful guiding things. Mm-hmm. Austin and I had a conversation yesterday about this. Actually, it's something that we're going to bring to the show and talk about. This idea of, so many people think what we should be chasing in life is happiness, and we're kind of talking about that. Man, that's kind of a weak thing to chase. And I know that sounds weird. That sounds like a harsh thing to say, but it's like happiness is so fleeting and mm-hmm. changing from day to day. And it's like you could go out and eat a box of cookies and it's going to make you happy, for a moment.
Right.
And so it's like you almost can't trust happiness. And so we've kind of been talking about this idea of finding something deeper for your life, something that's like fulfilling and sustainable, right. and substance. And for us, that is passion and purpose to what we do. I mean, that's what we have for what we do here at Impossible Performance. There are not always days that we're happy about what we're doing when we're editing podcasts at 2 a.m. and have to get up at 4 a.m. for work, So there are days where it's hard. There's days where, just like you talked about, there's mm-hmm. days where it's so hard. And especially those moments where you would lose a child, but yet you still have this passion and this purpose within it that I don't think will ever go away for you. And it's even the moment you started talking about it, it's like your voice lit up, your eyes lit up, like you can just see it in who you are. And not only that, but I see it every time we interact at Relay every year. It's always so fun for me because you're always about getting the kids' picture. Like that's always one of your biggest focuses. And I love it because so many of the kids were just kind of like grumbling. We're like, I don't really want a picture. No. And what I think is so cool about those moments, though, we had a new kid at Relay this year, Leo Zambori. Natalie Zambori's been on this podcast. We talk about her all the time. Phenomenal member of our team. She got to speak at Relay this year, mm-hmm. and just unbelievable role model and powerhouse of a human being. Mm-hmm. And her son is one of the most strong and powerful kids I've ever met too, with how he's overcoming everything. He's overcoming it. But he and I were at Relay this year, and I think he might have been in the photo. I can't remember if he jumped in. He was? Okay. Mm-hmm. So he was in the photo, and I remember after the photo, we walked down to do the survivor lap, and he did not want to do the survivor lap because I think he's a little bit in this phase where Bridget is now, where he's kind of like, I'm a cool kid. I'm a strong kid. He's like, I don't want to be seen as like the kid who had cancer. Right. I think he's a little bit in that phase. And again, that's perfectly okay. I 100% understand that. But he's kind of sitting there by the survivor lab. He's like, I don't know if I really want to do it. And I just looked at him and I said, because I used to struggle with this, and here's what made me reconcile it. I looked at him and I said, hey, so you do not have to do the survivor lap. Like, I don't want you to feel any pressure to do it. Like, this is something a choice you make for yourself 100%. But I said, one thing I want you to think about, though. I said, your mom never missed a doctor's appointment. She never missed a treatment. She never missed lab work. She never missed a scan. She never missed anything. And she did all of that for you. And so I said, don't think about this as something you're doing for yourself. I said, think about this as something you're doing for her in a way that you can thank her for everything she's done, because this is going to mean the world to her, to watch you walk in a survivor lap. And I said, I know it sounds dumb to you. And I said, it feels dumb to me sometimes. I get it. Because, I'm never oh, I want to be paraded around kind of person either. Yeah. It's hard to be celebrated for something you feel like you barely survived.
Yeah.
But I said, I 100% get it. But I said, maybe, it'll feel a little different if you think about it as a way you can say thank you to her.
Right.
And that was one of the coolest experiences for me, because I saw his brain turn and I saw it click in him, and he marched right up to that starting line. He's like, all right, we're doing this.
Yeah.
That was such a cool moment for me, because it's it gave him a way to do that survivor walk and feel like he's doing it for his mom.
Yeah.
And it empowered him in that moment. And that was just so cool to see from him. And I think it had a really powerful effect on Natalie, just to be able to watch him do that, and it's one of these pieces I would just offer to anybody out there battling any challenge. Sometimes there's pieces of it we don't love. There's pieces of it we'd rather not do. But if you can think of things in terms of how can I pay it forward to all those who have done so much for me? And that's just, I think there's a level of passion and purpose in that you'll never find more fulfilling.
So I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was a time you didn't want to walk with the kids up front. You didn't say it, but the look on your face was, I'm in college. I do not want to be up with the kids in front, paraded around with all these little guys.
Yeah.
Give me a chance to go back there with the 5-year people like I'm supposed to. And I told you, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I told you it is so incredibly important for these kids to see you, and more important, for their parents to see you, that you survived, you are thriving, you're in college, there is life after cancer. And that's one of the reasons that I have the kids all grouped up, because it's so very easy for people to say, oh, kids don't, it's very rare that kids get cancer. It's not rare. It's just not.
It is
if they
crushingly
get,
common.
Yes. And if they get buried in the adults celebrating the 1 year and the 5 year and the 10 year, if they get buried in that group during that survivor parade, then it gets lost. They get lost. And they need to be up front where they can be seen. And the kid survivors who are now adults and are thriving need to be up there with them, showing the other parents that are standing there cheering their kids on that there is life after cancer. There has to be something next.
Yeah.
Has to be.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful that you accommodate me.
No, I'm really glad you shared that, because I'll be honest, I don't remember that.
I've had that conversation with just about every teen.
It's amazing though that you saying that to me must have had a profound impact on me on a subconscious level I didn't even realize, because that's exactly how I see the world now, and that's basically exactly the words I gave to Leo Zambori, but I wonder if that ever would have fostered in me the same way
you were
if
still
I
a
hadn't
teen.
heard that from you. No, but I think it's one of those things where sometimes we feel like our words or our messages are lost on people, but I've always had this mindset of it's never lost. Like if they hear it once, it plants a seed that will flourish someday down the road,
Right.
with the right kind of trigger, the right kind of water and fertilizer and proper conditions. And so I'm so thankful you said that to me back in the day, because I just know I can remember back to that 2014 Relay for Life. For whatever reason, that's one of the things that's kind of stuck in my head from that that whole time period and that whole journey. I don't remember those specific words, but I do remember that I was like, definitely would have been in the mindset of like, I don't want to walk, I don't want to parade around. I definitely think I would have been in that mindset. But I know hearing those words would have given me a reason to be proud to be there.
I'm glad.
Yeah. So
I'm
thank
sorry you
for
don't
that.
remember it, but I'm glad.
And I don't think I need to remember it, because it had a subconscious impact on me that has probably led to so much of what we're doing today. So deeply appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap things up here?
I don't think so. I think my phone is blowing up because I've got an appointment after this.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Well, we'll wrap it up here pretty quickly. Guys, thank you for listening to this episode and checking it out. As always, the number one thing we could ever ask for you is if you found something impactful in your life in this episode and you know someone you think it would help, please share it with them. Our mission and our vision that we read at the beginning and end of every podcast is all centered around spreading this message as far as possible to help build as many people up as possible. And you are the number one way we do that, by sharing podcasts, sharing posts, sharing everything we do. It helps spread this message, and we could not thank you or have enough appreciation for everything you do to help us build this business and this brand, and most importantly, this message behind everything we do. We want to send a massive thank you to our sponsors and supporters for not just this show and what we do here, but for the Columbus Marathon and our efforts in spreading advocacy and awareness and raising funds for childhood cancer. Those are King and Fifth hats, which you see Austin and I wear all the time. We're wearing right now. Incredible company, really centered around equipping people with the best products for every situation in their life. And not only that, they are incredibly motivated and moved by what we're doing here, what you guys are helping us do, and they've made several ways to give back to our cause, and we couldn't thank them enough for helping to spread advocacy and awareness in that manner. You guys can check out the link in our bio, use code PERFORMANCE10 at checkout, save yourself a little bit of money. And our newest brand partner on board, who we have not officially announced to you guys, but we are incredibly excited to do so. You've seen us drinking them the last several episodes, but it's right here. Kinetic, that you could call it an energy drink. I don't call it an energy drink. I call it a performance drink, because there's no caffeine in it. There's no caffeine, no sugar, no artificial colors, no artificial ingredients, no nasty stuff that you don't want to be putting in your body. There's 12 grams of a patented blend of ketones that, guys, I'm going to tell you, it is going to supercharge your brain. It has actually pulled me and Austin probably about 90% back on the amount of caffeine we were intaking. We were intaking way too much caffeine trying to drive all this forward, way too much. But it was kind of our one vice we're allowing ourselves to lean on, and Kinetic has almost instantly pulled that back. It helps with energy for training, helps with mental clarity for performance. You guys definitely want to check out the link in the bio. We've got more stuff with them to come, but we are very excited for this opportunity, and they're also helping us out in our efforts to spread advocacy and awareness for all those battling childhood cancer.
Absolutely.
Not just the kids themselves, but the parents, the caregivers, the doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, the foundation leaders, the friends, the family, the neighbors, everyone who is invested in this fight. As Desni has perfectly laid out for us, it's not a fight anybody does alone. Research and progress and giving back is never done alone, but there are fortunately so many incredible, impossible human beings out there who are willing and ready to help drive this forward. So we are so thankful to all of you guys And Desni, I appreciate you really, truly for coming on the show, sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, you've been a phenomenal role model for us in everything we do. Not just looking to see how you've built BrAva you've helped build BrAva into the organization it is, with so many other incredible people, as you've mentioned.
Incredible.
And we are very excited to have some of those people on the podcast coming up in the future here. But not only that, but just as a survivor. You know, we talked about, I think it was even off camera here, this idea that a survivor is not somebody who is cured of cancer and lives past it. A survivor is somebody who is faced with cancer, faced with the impossible, as we would call it, and chooses to show up and fight every single day without giving up. And yes, there are going to be days you want to give up. There are going to be days where you have almost nothing to give. But as you highlighted, that's okay. Because as long as you show up and give what you are able to give to those and that which is most important to you in your life, you are surviving cancer. And that's not just limited to the people who are personally battling it. It extends to their caregivers, their family members, their community, everyone who shows up with passion and purpose for this fight to continue on, to motivate and inspire others, to bring the most positive influence and the most positive impact to health, both mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, to everyone involved in this fight. You are surviving cancer, and you are helping us to do so every single day. So thank you for coming on today. Thank you for being a part of this series. Austin, brother, you got anything else for us?
Absolutely not.
All right. Well, appreciate you guys listening to this episode. As always, thank you for everything you do to help us spread this message and this mission and this mindset. Because at Impossible Performance, we are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. Thank you for listening, and as always, be impossible.